Here we go. Welcome to Violent Minds. I'm Mark Chauppetta, your licensed private investigator, and this above me is
Keith Ablow, Dr. Keith Ablow, 25 years as a forensic psychiatrist and writer and all the other things that you and I do. I really think like if people stay true and kind of keep checking in on these podcasts, they're going to learn a lot about very different minds than theirs or mine or yours are likely to be. Some dark and compelling characters, not always bad people by any means. I mean, Chuck Liddell's a great person, but he isn't your run-of-the-mill person.
No. And as we're talking, I'm looking down off camera here. My phone's been ringing for the last hour, trying to get a phone call. I have inmates that call me routinely from the jail that want to talk with me. And I have to accept it through a secure system. And I've been avoiding them for the last couple of days because some of them are clients, some of them are new potential clients. But yeah, it's it's that whole if you don't kind of set the tone with them, then they'll take advantage of you. And I'm not going to be answering my phone all hours of the night talking to people, within the penal system here. So that's my world.
Well, but then look, I mean, all right, you know who you're talking to, right? So
yes,
you ended up in a world where people are calling you from jail at all hours of the day and night. This is not an accident. I mean, you started out in life. Now you're a private detective. You're an MMA fighter. You're lots of things.
Yeah.
But you started out as a prison guard, and now you get prisoners calling you from prison, and you think this happened like accidentally. Like, I mean, this is not happening to most people. So there's a reason why, and we're going to figure it out by the end of 100 of these podcasts. We'll figure out why are you attracted to darkness and to figuring out some pretty dark dramas that you delve into.
Well, will you tell your dog that we're doing a podcast right now?
Yeah, I know. I've got to tell Charlie that we're doing a podcast. I will let him know.
I don't know why I am. There's a lot of darkness in my life, and the darkness of disease, the darkness of multiple divorces, the darkness of of a criminal investigator solely. So yeah, there's a lot of darkness in my life, and why do I gravitate towards that? I never really thought about it that deeply, Doctor.
Yeah, but see, that's a clue too. You've never really thought about it that deeply. It's amazing. Okay, I got to get my dog to stop doing that, and I will at the break. But it is a clue when you think about, okay, that's a pretty amazing thing. It's weird that I've never thought about. It's your mind has been working overtime to not think about it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So we need to figure out, well, okay, so Mark's never thought about it. That's got to be for a reason.
But that I fell into being an investigator. It's not something that I seeked out in my life. It's something that just sort of fell in my lap in my early 20s. And, I was attracted to the profession.
Yeah, except one man's accident is another man's plan, in the sense that there are lots of people who, if you said to them, hey, what about this? How about you investigate crimes, criminals, insanity, assassins, gambling debts gone bad, broken limbs, knife fights, gang members? They'd be like, are you crazy? Now, you didn't say that. You said, sure. Yeah, that sounds good. How much is it an hour again? So that makes you different.
I'm on trial right now as we speak on a gangbanger homicide case. So I've been running around all week during the days, assisting counsel on this particular case.
I think it's a revealing thing when you say I'm on trial. The question is, what crime or crimes might you suspect yourself of being guilty? because you do linger in the, you could say the same of me. Hey,
Yeah.
Keith, forensic psychiatrist, what is it? Why do you want to unravel these things? What mysteries have you lived with?
Yeah, get out of your chair and go take that bone away from Charlie.
I'm going to take Charlie. I'm just going to put him right outside the door. He won't be pleased, but it's okay for this short time.
We're going to take
we're going to welcome back anyhow. We're going to welcome our guests very soon.
Yeah, well, go take care of Charlie. And
all right, I'm going to put him outside. Hold on here. Hey, Chauppetta. That's Charlie.
Hey, what's up, Charlie?
Flying beagle right now. Okay.
Well, this is the beauty of a podcast, and this is the beauty of getting into our minds. And as you can see, Dr. Keith Ablow is trying to get into my mind, and he seems to think there's meaning behind everything in life, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. So we will, we'll decide that as we go along and as we do many more of these shows. But I'm excited about today's show because coming on the show is someone that has quite an interesting life, and his name is Andrew McKenna. Andrew McKenna is the author of Sheer Madness, From Federal Prosecutor to Federal Prisoner. Oh, there you go. You're back. I was talking about you while you were gone, that you seem to think that there's a meaning behind everything in life. And I don't know if that necessarily, applies to everything.
It doesn't apply to everything, but it applies to so much more than people think. I mean, Freud did say sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
How about a dick is just a dick?
I think that's what he meant. Right. But, I think people far too frequently think there's no meaning when there's extreme meaning. So yeah, I do think you can understand much more about people, as we're going to learn, by getting into the nooks and crannies of their psyches, because things have meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a previous podcast, we got into the psyche of a cage fighter. On this episode, we're going to get into the psyche of a federal prosecutor turned federal prisoner. And as we go along, we're hoping to bring on some guests that may be a little cutting edge when it comes to the criminal mind. Maybe some criminals themselves, rehabilitated criminals,
or not
current criminals, or possibly some of my clients that are within some of these penal institutions that want to tell their stories. So, the violent mind, which is the name of this podcast, it has a very broad, scope. So I'm excited about what doors are going to open as we go along with this show.
Well, let's get at it, man.
Well, we're going to get at it. I'm just waiting for our guest to check in. So,
okay. Look, that's where you have the controls.
In the meantime, let's get into the mind of Dr. Keith Ablow.
Oh my God! Listen, I'm just texting our guy. I want to make sure he's he's running. He says I'm running 45 minutes late. Apparently, people don't think of entertainment anymore as like, okay, look, the curtain's rising.
So he's not coming on for 45 minutes.
Robbing a bank. No, just kidding.
Oh,
kidding. Yeah. So so the psyche of Dr. Keith Ablow. I'm an open book. What did you need to know?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, you've had a lot of tragedy in your life, and you've been faced with a lot of challenging times based on just doing a basic search on yourself. How have you dealt with that? Has your medical training helped you cope with some of the things that you've had to deal with personally? And if you're not able to cope with those things, you look at yourself like you're hypocritical, especially if you're giving this advice to people?
Right. So in fact, everything I've gone through, and it's not like, believe me, I'm not in Afghanistan. I'm not, worried about getting into the airport or dying. It's not that. And so for better or worse, I've been able to get to a point where the why becomes everything. So I don't think it's like depersonalizing or not being in the moment, but when things happen, I really feel like mostly I say, huh, interesting. What am I supposed to learn from this?
Mhm.
And how am I going to navigate this? And since I err on the side of saying, in the end, if you're attentive and committed, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. I end up, on good days, on bad days, look, and it's anyone's bet, right? But on good days, I end up thinking, interesting. I'm looking for how the adversity contributes to an opportunity to be powerful for the good.
Right.
So I'm always thinking that way. I recommend it to other people all the time. Just so you know, it's not just me. I do share this with people. And when I do my pain to power coaching, it's always about, listen, life is not random. At some point, you're going to have to use this to good purpose. What's the best purpose that you could apply it to? And, you can kind of smile at yourself at some point in your journey if you can say, wow, I never would have thought that lessons learned when my back was against the wall would come into play now when it's really important.
Right.
Right. And so, I've worked with lots of people who've gone through lots of things. And I always tell them this. Thanks for teeing this up. I always tell them this. If you go to a movie and the main character's in trouble, you don't walk out. Nobody does.
No.
Nobody gets up and says, well, looks like Bruce Willis is in a load of trouble. Better get out of here.
Right.
The only stories we do that with are our own stories. What you do in a cinema, you should do in your life, which is you sit there and you say, interesting, I wonder what's going to happen.
Yeah, because there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that maybe the trouble in our lives is just the either the beginning or the middle, and there's got to be an end, and hopefully it's positive.
It's always about faith. Someone told me a story about, a prisoner had killed somebody, he's getting transported to an island. True story, supposedly, but it happened in antiquity, so who knows? And he's thinking, my life's over. I wish I could kill myself on this ship before I get to this horrible jail. Well, the ship capsizes. He saves 3 people's lives. His sentence is commuted, right? Because he's done this heroic thing. Now, 1 minute before that happened, there was no way that he could possibly think that anything like that was going to happen. But if you have faith, then you're, how many of us are Nelson Mandela, or, who can go to jail for decades and think, I'm not leaving until I leave on my own terms.
Well, our guest went to jail for a number of years coming up, and and I'm going to be curious to see how he handled that, because it certainly challenges you, as a person. I mean, I feel like I've been challenged as a person, with what I have in my life, and you get to a point where you either give up or you push forward, and you have to push forward. There's no other options. I feel for those that don't have the ability to push forward, because I think it's there, for people to do it. It's
and I think people lose that ability when they lose the conviction. In order to have the ability, it sure helps to have the conviction that things tend toward the good.
Right.
Right. And that even things that are very difficult, sad, challenging, if you really look at it through a lens and you say, I wonder what good will come of this. I'm sitting here and I'm willing to entertain that somehow I'm being made more powerful, or simply that I refuse to hate anybody, and I'm going to continue to love the people in my life that I love and myself. And then, that's a pretty decent lesson.
Yeah, you know what? 100%. Let me ask you something, since we're sitting here kind of freestyling while we're waiting for our guest, and our guest's going to be coming up soon. So, I seem to, my wife and my friends all tell me, for whatever reason, and they see it as a bad thing, but I see it as a positive thing. I'm sort of stuck in the past. I'm sort of stuck in the 80s, which is where I grew up.
Okay.
and a lot of people are stuck in their past, but I see as I get older, I become more stuck in my past. And instead of getting enjoyment out of it, I often sometimes get pain out of it. Instead of the enjoyment, I should just see it for what it is. That it's an old TV show, it's an old movie, it's an old photo from something that happened in my life. But often that just reminds me of the fact that I'm getting older and life is getting on the backside of the green, I'm on the whatever hole, if you're going to use a golf analogy, and my wife sometimes is like, what's wrong with you? And the way I justify it is that, I do have some darkness in my life, in that back then there were simpler times. So my brain that's a coping mechanism, that I take myself back to those times because it's a safe zone for me.
Yeah.
Do a lot of people do that? And then the other thing, Keith, is that I blame Hollywood because all they do is feed it to guys like us, meaning Hollywood is run by people our age that long for the past. So television and social media, and it just constantly throwing our past in our face. Look at how great it was back then. Look at how great the music was. Look at how great the television was. Look at how great everything was back then, to the point where you start questioning the present.
Well, right. So if you want to engage with the present, I think there were simpler times back then. We have, in a lot of ways, lost our way. This is not a good thing, the extent to which we're addicted to technology. Life has become less grounded and less human, no matter what, the founders of Facebook and Twitter would tell us. In fact, our lives are being absorbed into the internet, and we are becoming depersonalized. So, right. So you could grieve that and say, oh my God, this is horrible. But you know what? In the end, the truth always wins. And so any day, that's the other thing, is like, look, nobody knows whether they have 1 day, 1,000 days, 10,000 days left in their lives, whatever it might be. You don't know. And so the question really should be, hey, tomorrow, if the pitch comes right over the plate and I can hit a stand-up double, will I be in a position to hit the double? Right. And to stay very alert for that opportunity. You never know.
I say to my son, I always reference the old times to my youngest son, and he's, how great we had it. And, how times today are somewhat challenging. And he's like, well, didn't your parents say to you, Dad, that how great we had it back then and how bad, how bad it was when I was a kid? I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. But I honestly feel like it's different now for some reason. It's
different. I mean, it's different. I have that sometimes, again, I'm not holding myself out as a role model. I do have the capacity sometimes to imagine this versus, like the Afghanistan thing or the bubonic plague or whatever it might be, where, look, I mean, I can still walk down the street and grab a Starbucks coffee. It's hot. Right. I still have the whatever outrageous price they charge for that cup of coffee. I can predict when I get back, it's probably going to be dry in here. I don't have leaks. We got spoiled.
We are spoiled.
We got spoiled because these are extraordinary things.
My youngest son has made comments to me about certain things that make me wonder what's being said to, what he's reading and listening, and all I have to say is, you know what? Spend 1 day, in a third world country.
Or in jail, as you did. Not because you were,
yeah, exactly.
Not because you were, arrested, but because you did a reality series for a day where you were an inmate.
But it's okay. You're making fun of me because I couldn't stick it out, and I actually asked to leave the show after 1 day because
I'm not making fun of you. What I'm tapping into your experience, which is imagine. I can't fathom it. It's hard to imagine. Our next guest, years in prison, and it's hard to imagine. Well, what do you tell yourself as every day is going by and you're like, oh, well, it's 1,000 more days or it's 2,000 more days.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
you just right. You just have to make the best of the time. And, I have a lot of clients, especially when I'm sitting with clients, and we're discussing potential plea deals. Okay. They're going to offer you so many years in life. I mean, so many years in prison, and you're not, and you won't be in there for your natural life. You might be out when you're 65 years old, and you're telling this to a 20-something-year-old kid. You're trying to justify it to him that, you know what, take this deal because getting out at 65 or the possibility of parole at 65 is better than risking going to trial and not getting out at all.
Why don't more people go on the lam?
Right? And just run.
Well, I'm wondering, I mean, why don't they? What is it that they figure, then I'd have to say goodbye to my whole family. I can't be in touch with them. I'm going to live like from homeless shelter to homeless shelter. What is it?
I mean, probably because it's not very bright to begin with. If they're, considering some of these crimes that they're committing, so, and they probably don't have the capabilities or the means to be able to do it.
Right.
It might be a good business to get into, train them, how to go on the lam, how to, I mean, geez, you just go to Mexico, right?
I don't know. See, I don't know. I mean, I suppose they could find you in Mexico. I mean, if you were a self-report to federal prison and they trusted you completely and they said, look, you're self-report, you're going to come into Allenwood or whatever penitentiary, federal penitentiary, it's 11 years, 15 years. Would you say, yeah, I'll be there, trust me, I'll be there? And would you then show up, or would you be Whitey Bulger and not show up?
Right. Whitey did a pretty damn good job, hiding,
Long time.
Yeah, I mean, just pretty much under people's noses out in Santa Monica, California.
And that's being on the FBI's most wanted list.
Right.
Right.
Right. That's having his face out there. But, he certainly was a bright individual. It's not someone that I look up to, but.
So would you show up, or would you be like, that's
if I didn't have any family to worry,
yeah,
what do you got to lose?
Right. But if you do have family, do you have the capacity psychologically, for good or bad, to say, look, it's as though I've died, I'm out?
Yeah, I'd probably run. And I'd probably find ways to communicate with my family.
Yeah, dangerous to communicate.
Right. And I would let them know that I was running, obviously, but that puts them in a culpable situation, for them. So yeah, that's a tough question.
You know what I would let you do? I think what we could do is just build like a bit of a studio apartment behind one of my closet doors. And since we look sort of alike,
yeah, one
of us would be in the studio apartment at any particular time, and we just switch it up. So it'd be like, hey, there's only one person here.
Yeah.
There you go. I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question, though.
A lot of my clients like being in prison. A lot of my clients like it because they get 3 square meals, and they get medical insurance, and, and they have a roof over their head, and they get to beat an addiction, or they don't have loving family members at home. So it's, for some, they like being there. Mr. Andrew McKenna, author of Sheer Madness, From Federal Prosecutor to Federal Prisoner. And I will say that based on the photograph I see here in your bio, you're kind of going rock star on us there, sir.
Yeah, just growing the hair out a little bit. That's right.
What do you, my youngest son, he's 15, and he wants to have his hair long, and I don't want to have it long. As a dad, should I allow him to be free to do what he wants with his hair, Or because I
Well,
still have custody of him until he's 18, should I say, hey, look, pal, I want it high and tight? Now, I don't know if that's a question for Andrew, or if that's a question for, the mind reader over here.
That might be one for Dr. Keith Ablow right there. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I know.
My dad was just about earrings. He didn't want earrings.
Right. Keith, what am I just a bully to my child, or am I just old school?
Yeah, I don't think there's much upside in prescribing style to today's teenagers. I think people go through one phase after another. So if that's the worst that you deal with, rather than
Good point.
I don't want you using LSD, right? Then I think you're okay.
Well, he's an actor, and I told him that it's better to have his hair a little shorter, and then if someone in casting wants him to grow it out, then so that's how I kind of approached it. So he's just at that awkward stage. But anyways, enough about me, enough about Keith. Before you came on, Keith was just psychoanalyzing me, Andrew.
I missed it.
Yeah, which you'll probably get some of it during this interview, but I want to welcome you to the show. I feel like in another world that I've possibly spoken with you before, but it could have been a dream. Maybe it just.
No, you look very, very. I don't know if I mentioned it to Keith, but you look really familiar. I think we've met at some point.
Was it in federal prison?
Well, were you a corrections officer?
So I was a correction officer, and you were a former federal prosecutor. Where were you a prosecutor? In what state?
Washington, D.C. And also Alexandria, Virginia, Eastern District of Virginia.
And where did you get your law degree?
Albany Law School in upstate New York.
Oh, the prestigious Albany Law School.
It's funny. The people I practiced with at DOJ were mainly from the top schools. A lot of Harvard and Yale
And so just to set this up, people may be amazed to learn that you come to us looking like, you're balanced and you seem well nourished and composed. And yet your life story, as so many people's life stories are so intricately woven and so complex. Yours, though, is, one of the more complex I have heard, and I've heard a lot, which takes us from you being a federal prosecutor and also having served in the Marines, right?
correct.
As an officer related to legal matters. And you can sort of give the right terms for that. So it takes us from there. You did those things. Those are hard to do. Not everyone can become a federal prosecutor. Not everyone can become a Marine, the few, the proud. And then part of your life story ends up becoming a bank robber, like not common, and going to jail and then becoming the guy you are now. And so can you give us sort of a waterfront view of that path?
Sure. Believe me, it's still something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And it almost feels like, it's something that didn't happen to me, that it wasn't me. But sure enough, I went through, I hurt my back in the Marines, nothing that serious that would have required surgery or anything like that. But I was always a thrill seeker as a kid, not so much roller coasters or bungee jumping. I used those examples before. That was never really my thing, but I always seemed to kind of like push the envelope a little bit. I found myself getting very, very bored with life at times at a very young age. And I'm not sure why, but I was the youngest of four. My parents were pretty, well-adapted individuals, educators, both of them. And, later on in life, like, I'll tell you this, Keith, I know this for sure. I didn't learn good coping skills growing up, good coping mechanisms for stress, for feeling insecurity, for feeling that, the next shoe is going to drop. They're going to find out about me that I'm a fake, I'm a fraud of some sort. When in reality, I'm not, but
Right.
back then I felt like I was. And it took me years to realize, like, look, you're good at some things, you're not good at other things. Who cares? Who gives a shit, man?
Right.
What's the
Right.
big deal? But for some reason, I grew up feeling, I guess, a pressure to be a certain way. So I get into my teens, start drinking beer, smoking pot, and this is why I caution teenagers that I work with now to steer clear of it as much as you can, because or don't do it at all.
Because it was an Achilles heel for you, and it manifested itself. So you hurt your back, end up on, I'm taking it, pain pills, having read the
Yes.
book, et cetera. And so what happens? How does that end up equaling being in a bank, robbing it?
Well, let me ask,
basically,
can I ask real
yeah,
quick?
jump in.
You
Go
hurt
ahead,
your
Mike.
back. You hurt your back when you were in the Marines, is what you said, right?
That's right.
And then you went to law school after the military, or was that before the military? Did you do in what
So
order?
what I did right out of high school, I joined the Air Force, and as an enlisted man, and I was stationed out in Hawaii. I was a Ford air controller, so I was
Hickam Air Force
on
Base.
airstrikes. Yeah.
Hickam.
And so then got out, went to college, finished college, didn't know what to do with my life. My brother said, who was just graduating from law school, he said, you should go to law school, locks you in for 3 years. You don't need to think about your future for 3 years.
Mhm.
So I did that. And then he basically, sorry, I know we're jumping around here a little bit. I got off my track. Basically, I didn't want to go to a law firm. So before I started law school, I went into the Marines as an officer. As a lawyer, I had a lawyer contract. In the Marine Corps, every officer goes through the same training up to a certain point. Everybody goes to 10 weeks of officer candidate school. Everybody goes to 6 months of the basic school. And that's for every officer. After that, I went to Naval Justice School. So that was my path. And I didn't want to be 25, 26 years old, an associate in a law firm, carrying some partner's bags. I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I wanted to be in court duking it out. And and the way that I was able to do that is through the Marine Corps, because they will right away get you into the courtroom.
So you had finished law school, went into the Marines.
Went into the Marines, got commissioned, then started law school.
Ah, okay, got it.
Right.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah. So then I finish law school. I then go active duty Marines, because I'm already commissioned at that point, right? So then I go active duty and I go to the basic school and then to Naval Justice School.
Wow.
And then I do my tour. I did one tour with the Marines. I left the Marines. I went with the Justice Department. Things were great. I mean, my career was really going where I wanted it to go. Was I ever satisfied, Doc? No, I wasn't. I was applying for to the CIA. I interviewed with them, probably 16, 17 hours worth of interviews with the CIA.
Wow.
Finally, they told me no.
Yeah. What I was curious about was, were you hiding an addiction during this phase when you were going through these interviews, or did that come a little bit later?
No, it didn't really come until later. I mean, I've always, dabbled with this and that and experimentation, and, even took it to excess on many, many, many occasions. but never heroin, never anything, that strong or that dangerous. So it wasn't until I was prescribed Oxycontin that I really got in trouble. This is actually where Dr. Ablow and I met. We were debating this issue on Fox and Friends a long time ago. He'd been on so many times he probably doesn't even remember me, but
I do.
an issue. Yeah, that was it. But it really led me down a tough road. I didn't rob banks because of my addiction. That was a small little piece of it. I rob banks now, I believe, and I would love some more time, with Dr. Ablow on this is from a clinician standpoint. But I was very, very angry. I was angry that I had lost my children in a custody battle. I had lost my job as an attorney. There was something that my wiring wasn't right at some point, and it had to do a lot with depression and sadness and anxiety, and I did not handle it well, obviously.
No, right.
I have to own what I did, and I'm not making light of it. It's very serious. People could have absolutely gotten hurt.
Yeah.
And it's certainly no laughing matter, as you guys understand. I know you guys know.
Of course.
But
No, I totally get it. So in the context, and it's all in the book, Sheer Madness, but in the context of losing your marriage, losing custody of your kids, feeling as though you couldn't be heard and that you weren't getting any help with the addiction also, which doesn't help. In that context, take me inside your mind. I want to try to understand how that adds up to, well, then the next thing is I'm going to rob a bank. I mean, a lot of guys would go see a shrink, or they, God forbid, violate a restraining order. You took it to another level.
That's what I want to ask you about. And I'm not being, silly here, but
You want me to leave the room just for HIPAA reasons?
I'll just have you sign a release or something.
Okay.
But let's think about that for a second, because I did take it to an extreme, and it wasn't that people weren't willing to help me. I definitely didn't get a fair shake in family court. I know that. And as a former attorney, I know that I didn't. But that's no excuse. I mean, that happens to men all the time, and it happens to women too. And it used to happen way more to men, to my knowledge. But
100%.
yeah, you guys know. So
yeah.
I was very, very angry about that, and I was very, very frustrated. And I think it was a combination, guys, of this frustration, anger, at the family court system, anger at myself. I didn't avail myself, I should say, of help for the addiction. So the addiction had already taken off. The oxycodone addiction had taken off, OxyContin addiction. And the only way to get that, the only way to stop from getting physically violently ill over and over and over again was to do something equally as strong. And at the time it was heroin, and now I guess it's fentanyl. But man, I was trapped, guys. I was trapped. But you're right, Keith. Why didn't I take a baseball bat and start smashing up cars in a parking lot, or
join a gym?
Pardon?
Join a gym. Take your frustrations out.
Right. Yeah.
Positive.
Right, Mark. You're right. We can list a lot of healthy things, but I'm saying, why would I go to that? Why did I choose that it was almost, now that I'm talking with you guys about it, so this always happens when I talk to Dr. Ablow here. It just opens my mind up. It's freakish, but it was almost like it was a big fuck you to the world.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I can't see my kids, and I've, you know, strung together 5 months of really quality sobriety time. But yes, I still can't see my children, and she won't let me see them. You know.
Well, you know what? And she's malicious in that, because I've been in that situation where, you know, my children have been hung over my head, and there's no worse feeling than that. And it's the most horrible thing you can do, you know, as a parent, because you're only hurting your children. So I could see why you would go down those dark roads. You know, if it had ever gone to the extreme it did with you, you know, I may have robbed the bank or done something different myself, because my kids are my end all be all, like yours. And if you can't see your kids or be with your kids, then the way I used to see it was, then there's nothing else there worth living for, you know?
That's how I saw it, Mark. That's how I saw it. Now, in her defense, I will say this. She, you know, I was not an easy person. You know, I was going 100 miles an hour, and I'm not talking about drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. I mean, I was, you know, I'm an active person, and I don't know. I'm not the perfect partner, but but I do believe in her heart of hearts, 90% of the time she was doing what she felt was absolutely right. There was 10% of gamesmanship, which we all have. And especially when we get a lawyer, because then it's on, you know.
So I know
that's what happened.
Well, and I know that what literally happened is you were on your way to family court again and decided to take a different turn, literally, and ended up going to the bank to rob the bank. Now, you know, I mean, if you can take me inside your mind at that moment, fear, any, was it adrenaline rush, fear, being almost depersonalized and kind of thinking it's really almost not happening, but I'm going to do it. I don't know what it felt like.
I'll start by saying what it didn't feel like. It didn't feel like an act of desperation. You know, it didn't feel like I need to go in here and get this money so then I can go and get heroin or oxys. It wasn't that. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel nervous. I felt calm, and I almost felt a sense of relief and a sense of control. Not that I was controlling the people around me, right? I wasn't controlling the bank employees. Most of them, I was in and out of there, and they didn't even know that they'd been robbed, other than the one person to tell her.
Right.
So, but I felt a sense like I was able to control my situation at a time, guys, where I had zero control. I was navigating family court systems, you know, drug testing, you know, the job market, you know, I had no control over anything, but magically I went into the bank, and that's what I felt. I'm not sure what that is.
And you did or didn't have a weapon with you?
I didn't have a weapon. I knew that if I had a weapon, I wouldn't be here with you guys today, unless they allowed me to do it from prison. Because for armed robbery, you're going away, you know, for a long time.
Right. And so what your hope was, okay, so give me your conscious hope, which might have been, well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Give me your conscious hope for how the day, from the moment you walk into the bank until you go to bed that night, how your conscious hope, what it was, your conscious hope about how that would go. And then sort of the reality of how it felt walking out with the dough. You weren't caught at that point. You robbed several banks. So yeah, so what's that about? How did it feel?
Plus you
So
defaulted in court as well, right? Because you didn't show up to court.
right, I didn't go to court. That's right. I didn't go to
Yes.
family court that day.
Hmm.
Right. And so walking out, I knew that some of the money would go to groceries. I knew that some of the money would go to heroin, and that I wouldn't have to feel or deal this, I would get high, and I'd make it through another day, basically. But as this is going on, like every few days, over a span of, I think, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, I robbed 6 banks. So like every few days I'm doing
Wow.
this.
Mm.
Yeah. And it was a really concentrated period of my life.
What was your biggest
But
score? What was your biggest score? The biggest amount of money that you were able to get?
I think it was probably maybe 9 or 10,000.
Right. Got it. Interesting. And so once wasn't enough, twice wasn't enough, 6 times, we don't know if it would have been enough because presumably that's when you were caught, I guess.
Yes, I was caught the last time, and I was gonna almost do a suicide by cop thing.
So you were, yeah, I mean, I think it almost feels like at that point you felt like, look, this is like I've jumped out of a plane. On the way down, I'm going to do some pirouettes, somersaults, fly like an eagle, because I'm hitting the ground at the end. It almost
Yes.
feels like there was a sense of like, look, this is my last act. Robbing banks is crazy, but I'll get drugs from it, and I think I can pull it off. And anyhow, things have been, well, maybe withdrawn or stolen from you.
Mm.
There's a kind of parallel there, like, man, it's time for me to make a withdrawal. I'm losing everything.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, can
Yeah,
I-
man.
Did you
Yeah.
did you justify, did you ever consider robbing people for money, but justified robbing a bank as something that was less harmless? Because you needed money for drugs to support your habit, to help pay your bills, so you could get high, so you didn't have to deal with the stress and the pressures of the court. But for some reason, was going into a bank easier for you than maybe going and robbing someone, on the street? Or, I mean,
I just felt it did occur to me. But it would require so many more calculations. Like, one, does this person have any money on them? Do they have a couple of $1,000s?
Mhm.
And if the person fights me back, I'm then what? I
Mm.
mean, I probably had enough pent up rage in my system, and we talk about mind violence, and even though I'm not a violent man, but back then I think I was probably capable of anything. I think, if somebody resisted,
Mm.
I would have gotten it by any means necessary, almost.
Mm.
It's amazing because, I mean, again, we all think, or too many people think, that they are invulnerable, or that, the sort of foundation of their psyches is such that no amount of pressure would lead to any unexpected behavior or chapter of their life stories. I know that's not true because I've listened to so many stories, and it's not true because I imagine when you were an attorney, being educated, or a Marine or a federal prosecutor, if someone had said, what do you think the chances are of you becoming a bank robber? Would you have said, well, look, I suppose it's possible? Or would you have said, what, this is the craziest thing I've ever been asked in my life?
But what if I answer that there's part of me that thinks that that's not the craziest thing I've ever heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something wrong with me?
Well, so your answer is, look, that's not the craziest thing I've ever heard of. I can see how that might unfold in someone's life, even in my life. That begs the question. It doesn't make you crazy. It means that you're possessed of certain experiential knowledge, then transferred into the question and your answer to it. So it would predict that you had prior experience of things falling apart, like from a young age, that look, people masquerade around you, people underperform, things happen that are completely unpredictable, but I don't know, is that your life experience, or?
That people around me underperform?
Well, that things can appear to be one thing when they're very much another.
I think so. But I'm trying to think of but I think it kind of comes up in this sense, because when I look back over my history, so I got in trouble as a teenager. My parents got divorced when I was 13, 14, youngest of four. They literally sat us down and said, we're getting divorced. And apparently all my siblings knew, and I kind of knew things weren't great, but I had no idea. But I remember thinking, well, if I just want to go out and stay out all night and not, pay attention to a curfew anymore, that's what I'm going to do. That's why I joined the Air Force in the 11th grade.
In order to not get in trouble?
In order to basically get out of little Schenectady, New York. And, I needed a change of scenery. It's weird when I hear myself say that I was bored. To me, that sounds egotistical, but that's not how I mean it. I wasn't bored in terms like this person, this great intellect where, average stuff bothers, school, it's boring and stuff like that. No. I just had this sense of the absurd at a very young age and my place in it.
Right.
I mean, divorce in itself back then, and we're all pretty much in the same age demographic, is something that's certainly very traumatic. Gosh, no one was divorced back then. Now it's just accepted and kids can cope with it. But
yeah,
so I'm sure that affected you. And especially if you're in a small town and your family is one of the only divorced families in the town. Because I remember those days. I remember those kids specifically growing up. Oh my God, their parents are divorced. And those kids were always somewhat a little bit different from how I remember, or scarred or damaged. But
it's interesting you say that. I had forgotten you're right. That's the way it was. It was just starting to change. It was just starting to, the divorce rates I think were increasing, but you're right. It was still very much, so I don't know if it was so much of an embarrassment. I don't know. It was almost like an anger, like, well, you guys can't figure this out. You guys can't work this out. 23 years, and here I am, this indignant 13-year-old,
Sure.
and I can't make judgments about their relationship. Who did I think I was?
Well,
so so what I did was I just stayed out and started dating whoever I wanted to, and, kind of running a little bit wild as much as you can in, Schenectady, New York.
But not to miss an opportunity, you said something very deep, which is that you had an acute sense of the absurdity of life and your place amidst that absurdity. And so if you combine that with your really interesting observation. If someone said to you when you were a federal prosecutor, you wouldn't have said, "There's no chance I become a bank robber." You would have said, "Hey, I've heard stranger stories."
Yeah.
So you have this sense that life is sort of crazy, or there's an absurd entropy to it. Tell me more about that.
Okay. The way I see it is, I mean, life is absurd. And if we try to, if I try to make meaning out of it, then I'm going to come up empty. And anybody, the only meaning I can come up for what life is, other than it just being this absurd situation, is helping people. That's the only piece, and not me personally, but that to me is the only piece that truly makes sense in this world. Not politics aside, you know, geopolitics aside, whatever. I'm just saying in life in general, in our mere existence, Keith, I'm saying I do not believe that there is any true meaning whatsoever, but we should default to helping each other.
You know what really bothers me, sorry to step in, is that
No, not at all.
what the courts need now are people like you. You should be a federal prosecutor now after you've gone through these experiences. You would be amazing.
Yeah.
You know, and just have
Be a
such
different person,
different,
be a different prosecutor.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess that goes without saying, you know, and the good you would do. I mean, it just blows my mind that you're not able, you know, to, I would assume because of your criminal record that the bar wouldn't accept you back.
I haven't tried.
Have you tried or you haven't?
No, I have not tried yet.
Would you like to get back to practicing law? I mean, because that would be an amazing thing if you could go back, you know, in maybe not even as a prosecutor. You might want to go back working from the other side this time.
Yeah, if I went back, it would definitely be as a criminal defense attorney.
Hmm.
So what I do now is I do a lot of consulting work for attorneys, and I help some attorneys who reach out to me help prepare for trials, because a lot of I mean, I know some great trial attorneys that are very close friends of mine, but there are a lot of strangers out there that will reach out and ask me to help them prepare for their trials because they've never done trials or they don't feel comfortable. But here's the interesting thing. I think you guys would enjoy this part of it. I know Keith, you know, a little bit better than I know you, Mark, but in terms of coming up with a theme or an explanation of why something happened. Mm-hmm. And you know, even when the client himself or herself doesn't know why they did what they're accused of, but coming up with the theory of how all the pieces fit is, and it's not bullshit, you know, the truth's always somewhere in the middle, right?
No.
And that's fascinating to me. So yes, I would like to go back into the courtroom.
And what I mean,
I would like to.
You'd be such an asset.
I appreciate you saying that.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
I mean,
that's interesting.
I mean, this is coming from myself, and I investigate close to 400 criminal defense cases a year. So, you know, I have a little insight.
Wow. All right.
You know,
I really appreciate it then. Thank you. Coming from you, that means a lot.
I just have another question. Sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place, and you know, Keith has already analyzed why I do this, but did you ever ask yourself if you know where you would be if you didn't rob that last bank? You know, if you hadn't, you know, the second
I just stopped
bank where you weren't caught, you know, where you would be now, or what may have happened, or?
That's a great question. I'd never thought of that. You know, so if I had just not gotten caught, if I just stopped
Yeah.
altogether, man, I don't know. I don't know, Mark. I would like to think that I would have, you know, kicked the opioids and worked to get my law license back.
Mhm.
And well, no, at that point I still had my law license.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would have gotten
And-
back on you know, I don't know. Some intervention would have had to have taken place, divine intervention or judicial intervention, where things would have turned around with my kids. The deck was stacked against me. I know I accept responsibility for what I did. I know the decisions that were made. I understand why they were made. I really do, because I understand her perspective and the court's perspective and the law guardian's perspective. I you know, I was not a picture of health at the time.
Right.
And it was much worse than that.
Well,
But-
let me tell a prettier story.
Yeah.
Right. It's not it sounds like less good a story, but it's actually a better story. So my guess is that but for you going into the sixth bank and being caught, if you had gone 12 banks or never been caught or never robbed the banks, I think you might be dead.
Mm.
I think you might have overdosed. And I think we might never have the full story, as Mark alluded to, if you end up as one of the most gifted criminal defense attorneys in the country. Then we're going to look back and be like, wow, what a circuitous and beautiful journey.
Mm.
This guy starts out as a prosecutor, learns what it is to go through hell, is, you know, lucky enough to understand, look, you know, people have vulnerabilities and there's a story that explains what they do. And then he becomes this, you know, gifted, you're already doing it because you're helping attorneys do it. But if you went back and ended up back in the courtroom defending people, then we'd say, man, we might have lost him to heroin if he hadn't robbed that sixth bank. And look at him now.
Yeah, plus he was smart enough to, you know, under the influence of drugs, you were smart enough based on your legal training to know not to bring a weapon into the banks with you,
True.
which amazes
It's true.
me.
When I was a young prosecutor, pretty much brand new, I second chaired a bank robbery case down in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And so I did have exposure to it. And also the federal sentencing guidelines were mandatory at the time. So
Awful.
yeah, but I'll tell you what, because things would not have turned out the way they did, because Keith, you're either right, I would be dead, or I would be dead. There's no doubt about it.
Mm.
So then, but then I never would have experienced prison.
Mm.
And the book that I'm writing right now is talks about our prison system. And, you know, I never would have I probably would have not have met you guys, you know, and worked on different things. Never would have wrote a book, I'm sure, because that started as a journaling exercise that my psychiatrist recommended journaling.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
It's,
you know,
it's a positive, you know, it's making a negative into a positive, you know, as Keith knows, and you know, you may know if you've done some homework on me, and I bring it up often, but it's because it's my life, that, you know, my sons have a serious disease, And as negative as that disease is, people often ask me, do you wish you didn't have that in your life? Or if you made different decisions, or maybe if they weren't born or whatever, and then you wouldn't be dealing the last 25, 26, 27 years of your life with a serious disease. And I'm like, I wouldn't want to change things, because I have made such great friends, and learned so much and gone down roads that I never would have gone down. And, you can't look back and, and beat yourself up. And what what you've done, is amazing. I'm just curious from the drug side, in the how crazy drugs are today in our society. Do you have any resentment like towards that doctor that was prescribing you? And I'm sure you were going back in and getting prescriptions filled, that was prescribing you these Oxycontins or codeine, whatever it's called, that were assisting, in your addiction, that gateway to the next thing. I mean, you think doctors are over prescribing things nowadays when it comes to that? And that could be a question for Keith, but so it's a double question.
For me, I don't have any anger or resentment against him. I won't mention the doctor's name.
Mhm.
I fooled him. It started off innocently enough. My back hurt. The injury kind of came back after I went with DOJ. I was traveling all over, putting on weight, and I fooled him. And I was good. I wasn't good at it, but he knew where I worked. He knew I worked in the criminal division and, across the bridge. And I probably was one of the last people he would suspect. So no, I don't. And I don't, I didn't tell you guys this. The other day I had either a migraine or a, what are those headaches called?
Cluster
headache.
Yeah. Wow.
I had to go to the hospital because I didn't know. So Dawn had to drive me to the hospital, and so they treated it like a migraine. They didn't know. But you made a point when you and I were on television together. Doctors have to have the ability to treat pain in their patients. They do. I mean, we have to. And so I think when the opioid epidemic first came on, there was a lot of outcry, as there should have been, for many different reasons. But one was, let's keep an eye on prescribing practices for physicians. And I know New York's done a good job with that, but maybe they've gone overboard, because my sister had stage 4 breast cancer, and her oncologist was fine prescribing whatever, because he knew it was at the end anyhow. But her regular PCP was hesitant to prescribe pain medication, which we know is ludicrous. He should have been. And he was worried about he's worried about his license, and he's worried about his reputation and all this stuff.
I know a little bit about that. Yeah, it's it's a dangerous world out there for doctors. We talked before about this, but let me ask you, because I feel like there are moments when people could be much more powerful than they know, or it's not that they don't even choose to be, they don't even know. But if one of the tellers at one of the 6 banks, instead of handing over the cash, had reached under the window and said, "You need a hand, my friend," would you have stabbed it with a ballpoint pen, or would you have? What do you think?
It's hard to say, but I think I probably would have turned around and walked out, or given up.
Yeah.
I think I may have given up.
and just said, yeah, I can't, I don't know what's, I do need help. I need help.
Right.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's not enough of that goes on. And I think also that free will, from my perspective, maybe I'm getting too philosophical here, but I think free will is overstated. I think that people, it's not just the people who hear voices and do what the voices say that are lacking in free will. It's people whose lives have taken them into a particular place where it's almost like autopilot. They're not really in the driver's seat anymore, and restoring them to that position is what, if we had a healing system that kept people safe, but incarcerated them and healed them and kept them safe, we'd be a much more civil society than saying, I'm going to torture you for the next 7 years or whatever.
But prosecutors don't want to help people nowadays. Prosecutors don't want to look deep into someone's past or into someone's file. They just want to prosecute and get on to the next case. They don't look at people as people nowadays. And I see that in my caseload. They just want to be tough on crime, and they see it as a crime. They don't see it as a person. They don't see it as a person that may have committed this crime because they are addicted to something. So I think until we can get over that hurdle, in the lower level courts, that it's going to be a struggle, to maybe try to avoid going to jail. So it'd be nice if there were programs in jail or more programs, but it'd be nice to avoid jail and be able to correct it prior to getting in there.
Right.
How bad was it, jail? How bad was it?
In my view, it was absolutely awful. It was, it was violent. It was dirty. There's always a game. There's always a game being played, between fellow prisoners. But it was, and I'm not blaming the system, but I think this is how it naturally evolved. You have people who are basically in captivity being punished for doing wrong things, committing crimes. For us as a group to get along, there has to be rules. There have to be rules, rather. And there's a process to it. And when you first get there, if you haven't, grown up with a lot of people, relatives or friends who've been to prison, and you haven't heard stories, like I would hear stories about wars that, that my relatives fought in a little, but not prison. It takes some getting used to, and
to help prepare you a little bit. If you had a family member that did time, it might have helped prepare you down the road. But
well, at least
Thanksgiving dinner.
Like you think you're back on the farm or something,
So what was your worst experience? Worst experience in prison?
Probably, well, there were two. There was one night where I thought that, I just wanted to, because I had concluded that life is absurd, and I no longer had a purpose, so I considered ending it. So that was a very dark moment. But the worst thing, it's a toss up. It's either watching a guy get stabbed maybe 15, 20 feet away from me several times in the torso, and hearing it, the knife going in and out, or it was a group of people masturbating, I don't know, 8 or 9 feet away from me.
Right.
And we were in transit, and there was about, 175 of us in a place that should hold maybe 100. And these guys had just, they just decided to form a circle, and everybody pretended like it wasn't happening. It was fucking disgusting.
That's called a circle jerk.
Right, right,
That's,
right,
that's what the,
right. But
someone
but
told
Mark,
me.
yeah. So what would one guy would stand, and the others would have their backs to him, so he could do it, and he would have the privacy of the people standing around, like bodyguards or something like that. And then they just So
Kids in high school used to do it back in the 70s and 80s. I never partook in any of that stuff, but so you know. So they say that federal prison is the Disneyland of prisons. What you're telling us, it was dirty and awful and rotten. So that's not true, right?
no, not in my experience.
No, and I don't think it is in the experience of others I've talked to. And you're magnanimous or empathetic when you say, or something, when you say the system. Look, I don't blame the system. I do. I blame the system. I think, you know, if you're part of a system where you know that no good is being done, really, not really, where so much more good could be done, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's not like I hate those people, but I think I would legit say to, you know, somebody who was instrumental in perpetuating that system, you know, what happened to you? What's wrong with you? You're hurting people under the guise of helping them. That's very bad behavior.
Do you think they believe it? Do you think that the very top at Federal Bureau of Prisons and
No, I think they're miserable. I think they're miserable, vindictive, sadistic people who aren't in touch with it. Because otherwise, as I said to a judge in Massachusetts, who actually was a friend of mine, we did a trial, happened to have been a kid who I presented the story as a forensic psychiatrist, you know, mitigation of the sentence. I said, you know, one of the experiences that the kid happened to have had was his father had a hobby with his father's friends, that they'd sit on the stoop and they'd have the defendant as a kid run into a tree head first again and again and bet on how many times he'd have to run into the tree before he passed out.
Oh my God.
Okay. And so I'm listening
Animals.
to the judge lecture he's not my client. He is a client. I rendered an opinion about him that he had diminished capacity to control himself. And I'm listening to the judge like read him the riot act about his character. And I went into my buddy's chambers afterwards, kind of a buddy. I mean, I knew him from outside the court. And I said, did you not hear like what I said about his experiences with his dad? Did you not? I mean, I know you grew up in Newton, Mass. Like it's a nice place. Maybe you can't feel for what he went through.
Sure.
And look, Keith, if I felt for every defendant who came into this courtroom, I couldn't do my job. And I said, why do you want this job then?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a valid point there, but you're 100%
right.
I'm curious.
I was not the favorite of prosecutors or judges. I also said to Judge, I think it was Raya Zobel, who sentenced one of my other clients to 22 years going down the federal sentencing guidelines. You've had this many grams of cocaine with you. I said, in her chambers, I said, does it irk you, having to, I saw your finger and, you're 22 years. I said, that's a long time for putting things in your nose or selling them to other people who put them in their noses,
What was that person being tried for? You said you were the expert in the case.
Possession of a certain, like a kilo of drugs or whatever of cocaine.
So there's not even a victim there's not even a victim involved here.
So I said, so does it bother you? She said, no, that is what the government says. I have no capacity to decide. I said, I am so sorry. I have the wrong story. Someone told me that your family suffered through the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, they did. I said, well, you didn't learn anything, did you?
Right.
Right. So I don't know, that's why they hate me.
Andrew,
among other reasons.
A lot of honesty.
Can I ask you, being a federal prosecutor, going to prison, I believe that I read in your bio that during that whole time that you were in jail, you had to kind of keep your identity under wraps just for your own safety, so you didn't end up in the hole. How did you deal with that? Because I know I did a reality television show called 60 Days In. When I walked into that dorm full of inmates, I had a piece of paper on me, and it said, it had my little fake story, and it said what I was there for. And that was the first thing they were interested in. The white leader of the cell block that I was going to be on came right up to me. He wanted to make sure that I wasn't there for any child sex crimes. And when I wasn't, I was in like Flynn. Yourself, being a federal prosecutor, fearing that maybe someone in there, you sent away. How did you deal with that? And did that add extra anxiety when you were in there? Or were you still at a point where you just didn't give a fuck?
No, I was starting to give a fuck, and I got there, and it was for the first year or so, it was a really big concern, because they could find out many ways. And it basically, what you're talking about is your paperwork. Let me see we need to see your paperwork. Has anybody checked his paperwork? That's what it's talked about. And you want to make sure that they're not child molesters or rapists or snitches. Even though we the three of us probably all know that probably 70% of people in federal prison have tried to tell on somebody else at least. In my judgment and conviction order, it's clear, it's bank robbery. And so that wasn't an issue. If somebody had seen my entire pre-sentence my PSI, then they would have known all of my background. But anyway, you could have Googled it because, it was in the papers and stuff. So that's how people find out. That's how, like, when you have cops on the inside who, got jammed up and now they're in prison, people find out about them. They're targets. As a prosecutor, certainly would be a target.
You did
so
have.
I was worried about that, and then I get to Mark real quick. I got back to the point where I said, you know what? I'm not living like this. If somebody finds out and they want to come and stab me, come and stab me.
Yeah. Well, you did have the ultimate disguise, because it would have taken someone with the investigatory instincts of Mark Chauppetta to think, oh, the bank robber, he may have been a federal prosecutor. it's a 1 in a billion shot.
Right, it is a one. Yeah. Right, you're 100% right.
Yeah. That's
maybe someone was curious what type of banks he robbed, and then it popped up, federal prosecutor robbed.
Right, there you go.
Well, no, that's right.
Federal prosecutor, right.
Hey, and that's all you have to do is send a letter out, and I don't want to give away prison trade secrets, but we could figure out, especially these days.
If we got biblical with it, because you've referenced the randomness of the universe and how much of life is absurd, and you said, look, I think, helping one another out is probably what we're here for, loving one another, et cetera. There could be another thing, which is that really the most powerful story in human drama is the comeback story. It's resurrection. And so in a way, it's not absurd at all. In fact, your story is a story of resurrection, which is the least absurd of all.
Yeah.
That's why maybe you do have to go and be a defense attorney. And if you do, no doubt, because the world is more perfect than it seems, you're going to meet some guy whose life you change, or some number of guys or women and guys whose lives you change because you say something to them that convinces them they're not monsters.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
The people that I like, I have a gentleman for about 15 years, was sending me a Christmas card every year. He was a defendant on a murder case. And I was the investigator on the case, and we were able to get him a not guilty, rightfully so, because we believe that he wasn't guilty. And for so many years, he would send a Christmas card to my office. And, and I didn't see him back in the system again, which was great. So some of my greatest friends are those that have been to prison and that have committed crimes, that have learned from it, because there's something genuine and real about them, as opposed to some of these fake people that I know, within my circles. And,
Sure.
I don't judge people like that. My wife's brother did time in prison, had a drug habit, robbed the convenience store, did his time, one of the nicest guys on the planet, and has a family. And I would, and she mentioned that to me when we met. I'm like, I would never judge him for that. He's taking care of his kids. He paid his time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I just like people like yourself that I like people that have stories. And
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
When you look at reentry, we can you could have 10 different shows on this. It's really, the deck is so stacked against somebody who's done their time and is sincerely remorseful, is not by nature an evil person. And I do believe there are evil people in the world. I'd love to hear your take on that, Keith. But but for somebody who comes out who's trying to reintegrate into the community, if you were poor going in, chances are you're poor coming out. And it's
tough.
It's so tough. I had a law degree, so I knew I would be somehow okay.
Yeah. And
I also had a lot of support behind me, but I was in with so many guys who got out with absolutely nothing, nowhere to go, not even an address to put down.
Yeah.
What do you do there? I mean, now you're talking recidivism rates.
Well, that's why I see it all the time.
Yeah, and Mark too. It's almost as bad as saying F those people, being vindictive. They did the crime. Screw them. They're bad people. It's almost just as bad as turning a blind eye to what's really happening. And that's people are getting out with nowhere to go.
Right.
And no resources. And no trade.
And so it's kind of like shame on, us. I mean, in the society, because if you're holding somebody for a dozen years and you don't change them,
right?
Like a dozen years. Look, I can name that tune or change that story in a lot less. And so you had them. I mean, I would really say to whoever was running the prison, listen, this person killed someone else. Like you understand that's partly on you. I mean, I hate to, I guess.
Yes. You are right.
It's partly on you. You had him 12 years. Okay. And you're telling me you did your best, and I don't see a record of, I wanted to see 12 years, 52 times 12 times 2, let's say. So 100 times 12. I don't see 1,200 psychotherapy sessions, which is what I wanted to see, along with the minister visiting and books of poetry being put in the cell, even if he throws them out every single time, put another one in. I mean, it just doesn't add up to me. When you were saying that some decent and friends of yours, decent people and friends of yours have gone to jail, it reminded me of Daniel Lappin, Rabbi Daniel Lappin, called America's Rabbi, who was friends with Jack Abramoff after he came out of jail, the famous lobbyist who wore the fedora. And Jack went to jail for lobbying infractions or whatever. And they said,
I was in with Adam Cadan.
All right. There you go.
Adam and I were friends.
And so they asked Rabbi Daniel Lappin, the newspaper said to him, how can you be friends with Jack Abramoff after he broke the law. And he said, well, he's not a choir boy, but I don't know if I'd want to have beer with a choir boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'd want to have a bottle of beer with a choir boy. So,
Well,
so
we could talk with you all night, but
good.
if I don't get home, I'm going to end up in husband jail.
That's right. That's right.
You know, so Andrew McKenna, you know, you have one book out right now, Sheer Madness, that you can probably purchase on Amazon, I'm assuming, right?
Yep. Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble. You have
Some
another book
bookstores.
in the chute, but if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Because you do speaking everywhere too, so there might
Yeah.
be someone who wants to.
Yeah. So I speak nationally in, you know, keynote addresses, and you can reach me. I'll tell you what, I'll give you my Speakers Bureau agent is celebritymentalhealthspeakers.com.
Okay.
But you can reach me directly at Andrew McKenna and then the letters ACS@gmail.com. And you know, if you need help with anything, anybody listening out there, if you need some advice or just an ear, you know, shoot me an email and we'll get on the horn.
Are you familiar with Massachusetts law?
Somewhat.
Somewhat?
Yeah, I can't give legal advice, but I can
No.
give friendly
But you
legal
can.
advice.
No, 100%. So I want you to hold on when I end the podcast here. And I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, Mark, thank you very much.
And you know, now
Thanks,
that
buddy.
I felt like I knew you from a previous life, now I actually do know you. So
Yeah.
Andrew, you're an
Thank you so much,
inspiration.
Andrew.
Yeah, you're an
Yes.
inspiration
You're
to me,
welcome. Thank you, Keith.
you know, in many people. So thank you so much. And let's have you back on again soon.
That'd be great.
All right.
Talk to you guys soon.
Sounds great, brother.
All right. I got you.
Bye-bye.
You there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, I just stopped. This recorded too, so I just wanted to
Okay.
do a closing and just so you know, yeah, thanks so much for the gaff last week. This was great, and
Oh, no problem.
I can see you better this week.
I'm in a hotel room.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, all the hookers are in the bathroom, so
There you go. All right.
keep it down.
Well, I
Yeah.
heard Keith's hooker barking and
Charlie, my dog. Yeah.
Charlie the dog. But we interviewed Chuck Liddell today, so I'll be sure to pass along. Do you have
Man.
an actual podcast? So I can send the information to his. He has like a manager that handles everything. So
It's very close. So as soon as I do, I
Right.
won't rush him. And listen, I don't want to overstep.
no, not at all.
It's a huge ask.
He's the nicest freaking guy. Keith will tell you, he's the nicest guy on the planet. He is
My favorite MMA fighter of all time. And that's no kidding. Everybody says I'm the biggest fan, but I remember him when he first came up.
Keith was asking him about why his father left him. Keith was getting all deep with him. I'm like,
Well,
oh
you'll
my-
understand this, Andrew. Like, so, okay, so his dad leaves at when he's 3. His father walked out on him, and when he got famous, he contacted him again, and wanted to re-engage and explain why he had left. And Chuck, of course, felt, you know, justifiable rage, like, oh my God, it's, you know, I'm famous, so of course you want to re-engage.
Right.
So he didn't, right? And so, you know, so to me, I don't want to get beat up or anything, but I needed to tell Chuck that not being in possession of the why is shortchanging himself.
Yeah, I could see that. I would want to know.
yeah.
Even if it's bullshit,
He still
then at
seemed a
least
little
you have a
angry.
chance to dig. Yeah, and I, you know,
Is he?
yeah,
Is that right? Yeah.
What's that?
Well, no, Mark was saying he still seems kind of resentful or angry about it, you know?
Well, he's still, yeah, it
He's
turned
still
him, I
carrying
think,
it.
a little black and white, in that, like, look, you screwed me. I don't talk to you. You come back to me. It's over. Or you said you'd get in the ring with me, and if you die here,
How do you think
Like,
he got
right.
ready for his Tito Ortiz fight, Sandy?
I don't know.
I was saying that's how he got ready when he kicked the shit out of Tito Ortiz. He was thinking of his pops, you know.
Probably. I mean, to an extent, if he's not thinking about his father, he is thinking about his
He
father.
was even trashing Tito a little bit on the podcast. They genuinely don't like each other.
Oh my God. So Mark, I won't keep you guys. Now you got to go. Have you been on, do I know your face from TV? Have you been on TV? I know you said you were on that special.
No, I've just, no, not really. I just look like Keith. That's why.
Yeah, right.
No, did you watch my I sent you the link to my documentary film. You should watch it.
Oh, you sent that
Last
before?
week. I sent it last
Okay.
week. It's in an email. Take a look at that. It's called The Father's
will.
Fight. It's about MMA, a little bit about MMA, and then my fight with my sons who have who have a terminal disease.
I'll definitely check it out.
But I've trained with everyone. I've trained with Randy Couture. I've trained with Chuck Liddell. I train with Joe Lozon right now. So I've been around the MMA world a lot.
Yeah.
Started fighting bare knuckle when I was 29 years old. So
Damn.
yeah, right. I can't say,
Interesting.
yeah. I was texting. So when we hung up with Chuck, he was texting me all political shit. He was going off about Newsom and
No kidding.
yeah, he's wicked. He's crazy right wing. And
That's great.
and
That's right.
I told him that next time there's a good UFC card, I want to fly out to Vegas and go to the fights with him. So
Oh, that'd be outstanding, wouldn't it?
Wow, that'd be great.
maybe we can get all of us to go out.
I was going to say, Keith and I are going to tag along.
But
We're
fuck
coming.
yeah. Why, I've never been, I trained out at Extreme Couture in Vegas, but I've never been to the MGM Grand to see the fight. So I'd love to.
Who's real quick, Randy or Chuck? If you had to, who's the better fighter? Chuck's probably a better striker, but
better
Randy's
striker.
probably
Chuck, yeah, Randy's a Greco-Roman, Olympic. Yeah, I talked to Randy once in a while too. I could probably get him on the podcast, but he doesn't really fit. I don't think he really fits, but God, and then what were they, 1 for 1? Or was it, no, Chuck
2
won,
and 1, wasn't it?
Chuck won 2 of them. Yeah. Chuck
I
beat
think
Randy.
Chuck had 2.
And Randy got into the sport in an archaic age for MMA. Like he really didn't start getting any fame until his mid-30s, which is pretty old for a professional athlete.
Right.
But yeah, and Chuck tried fighting a couple of years ago. Who'd he fight? He fought someone a couple of years ago. He came out of.
I know. I can't remember who.
He got knocked out. He's got a glass jaw now, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but
I saw that.
A great wrestler. He just kind of abandoned his wrestling, because he was such a. And he told Keith this. He said, remember, he said once he smells blood, he just went in for the kill, and there was no one better at smelling blood like Liddell going in for the kill with those big freaking overhand rights.
Man, I know. Those big meat hooks. His wrists are like this big.
You ever watch The Ultimate Fighter?
In your head.
Are you a fan of The Ultimate Fighter?
I was, yeah.
Yeah, so he was on the first reality show, The Ultimate Fighter. That's where it began. And
Chuck Liddell.
Yeah, Chuck and
That's right.
Chuck and Randy. So my buddy was one of the original cast members, Alex Callery.
Oh.
So Alex is one that put me in touch with Chuck, and he's just been nice to me ever since. Like I think he just.
You guys get along. You're a good guy. You're likable.
I'm a little fan. I get a little fanboyish. I try not to, though.
I know it's hard not to, though.
Right? He's the fucking Ice Man. He's,
fucking come on.
Chuck
Liddell.
He talks about like fame and this and that, and he still walks around with a mohawk with the tattoos on the side of his head.
Well, I'm big on just yielding to that kind of thing, like letting it happen. When I was at Brown undergrad, JFK Jr. was there, and I happened to be waiting outside the cafeteria with an umbrella. It was raining, and he walked up next to me. He's like, "Do you mind if I stand under your umbrella with you?" And I was like, "Dude, you're JFK Jr. You can have the umbrella." I'm like,
right.
I was sitting on the beach when I lived in LA when I was 21 years old. I was on a beach with a bunch of girls and my buddies playing volleyball. It might have been Venice Beach. And you know, we're standing there and all of a sudden Rodney Dangerfield staggers up to us, half in the bag in a banana hammock.
That's great.
It's fucking awesome.
In full character, like, oh, you know, and,
Oh,
you know, and the
my
girls,
God.
like, the girls were asking him all these questions, and he's like, yeah, sure, can I pull it out and come on your back? And he's doing it, and like it was awesome, and we couldn't get rid of him. He had just filmed Ladybugs, that silly movie
Dude, that's
that all our
awesome. I
kids,
would've hung out.
all our kids watched, and he hung around for like a fucking hour. It was like, I
Wow.
mean,
Crazy.
fucking Dangerfield. I've met a lot of celebrities, as Keith has, and Rodney's Rodney, you know, it's,
Yeah, that's just a classic.
he's just the man.
Well,
but-
I played golf with Bruce Smith from the Bills.
yeah,
Oh,
weeks
wow.
ago
Cool.
Bruce,
For it
Very
was
cool.
a Jim Kelly fundraiser.
Freddie
out
there?
in,
was Freddie
Pardon?
Freddie Smirlis there?
no,
You know
I don't-
Fred?
no.
He played with Bruce Smith. He was their all pro defensive tackle. For, you know,
I know the
Freddie
name.
Smirlis, right, Keith?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't know, but yeah,
He's
okay.
from Waltham, Mass, but he played like 12 years
Okay.
for the Bills. He was an all
Wow.
he was a wrestler at BC. But
All right, I gotta go get
anyways,
Charlie.
yeah, I gotta get
All right.
watch my film and let me know what you think of it.
I will. I'm gonna watch it tonight.
It's
Oh, that's great.
It's an hour long. Thank you. And
Perfect. No,
this
thank
is
you,
the-
guys. I
Gentlemen, take
appreciate it.
care.
All right,
Yeah,
we'll
talk
talk
to you
about it.
soon.